Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this Inspiring Workplaces Power Hour. My name is Rosalind Fordyce. I'm an internal comms specialist at H&H. And in this hour, we're going to share with you some key internal comms and engagement insights, inspiration, advice and knowledge, and hopefully inject a little bit of energy into your day. So today's Power Hour, we're going to dive into inspiring culture, particularly in today's hybrid world. We know that employees who feel a strong sense of belonging are twice as likely to be engaged, productive, and satisfied. So let's discuss how to create workplaces where people can truly feel like they believe and belong to. I'm joined today by James Kotson, account executive at Achievers. James is a self-confessed employee recognition geek. He's been working in the engagement space for over 15 years. He works with companies across the globe to help them design, create, and build successful employee recognition platforms. James is a proud Welshman now living in London with his wife and their 2 teenage daughters, and also one very fluffy dog. Now, dog lovers, I can't promise that James's dog is going to make an appearance today, but we'll see what we can do. James will be exploring AWI research that shows how creating conditions for belonging has both an immediate and a lasting effect on employees. He's also going to share a practical perspective, looking at how we can make employees feel included, supported, and connected in the workplace. You'll then hear from me. I'm passionate about internal communications. I like helping make people happier at work, which considering we spend over a third of our lives at work, I think is pretty important. I'm based in Glasgow, and like James, if you couldn't tell, I'm also a dog lover with a fluffy dog. I'm looking forward to discussing with you what organizational culture truly means in today's hybrid world. And I'll also be examining how employees' expectations have shifted in regards to culture post-pandemic. We'll then come back for a Q&A. If you want to ask any questions, you can simply comment them on the page. You just need to make sure that you're logged into YouTube first to be able to do this. And so without any further ado, I'll hand you over to James.
Wonderful stuff. Hopefully you can hear me. Give me a thumbs up, Rosalind, if you can, which is...
I can, thanks.
Good stuff. Right, there we go. Can you see my screen? Hopefully you guys can. Perfect. So today, and thank you for that lovely introduction, by the way. Some people call me a recognition dinosaur. I prefer a recognition geek because it definitely doesn't make me feel as old. But I'd like to talk today about what we have uncovered here at Achievers, which we call those 5 key pillars of kind of belonging. And that's come out of some amazing research that we have done as a business. But what I wanted to do was just tell you a little bit about Achievers first. If some of you know Achievers, big star. If some of you don't, then shame on you. But Achievers have this mission, and we're trying to change the way the world works, like many organizations are around the world. We are a pioneer in the recognition and reward space. We have round about kind of 405, 410 customers around the world, with about 3.5 to nearly 4 million users using our platform. And what we are trying to do is create genuine cultures of appreciation using some pretty cool technology that allows employees to own recognition, be empowered to give and receive recognition, to celebrate birthday, to celebrate career milestones, and ultimately create an engaging, happy place to work. We're trying to make that difference. We know that 70% of employees globally are not engaged. Absolute shocker. Our whole organization is kind of anchored on 3 key pillars. And that first one, which is really what I want to talk about today, is workforce science. We have our own Workforce Institute in Achievers, and it's our research arm. And it really has been informed by 25 years experience in the employee recognition space. And everything we do is backed by science. And then we have our smart tech, where the science and the research conducted is put into practice in our platform. And maybe one day, if any of you are interested, I'm happy to show you what that looks like. And then finally, we have our amazing community of experts across the Achievers organization, and there's about 400 of us. And that's our service teams, acting as trusted advisors through implementing a platform, customer success to keep the activation high, the interest high, and also kind of that wider customer community. But please don't just believe me and don't believe Achievers when I say it. I love this from Deloitte. 79% of organizations agree that fostering a sense of belonging was really important to their success. And actually 93% agreeing that a sense of belonging drives organizational performance. Our Workforce Institute, as I did mention, they conducted this study, which really identified belonging as the epicenter of the employee experience. So it's no surprise that we're investing fully in this since kind of 2020. And the research led to the belonging model, which has been applied to our platform, really there to help improve that employee experience for the customers that we're working with, and really helping them drive better people, metrics, and success. So let's talk about the bread and butter of today's presentation. Our study on belonging was actually an outcome of one of our primary research programs, which really led to the Achievers Workforce Institute really being an innovator in this space. And about a year and a half ago, we released this pretty comprehensive model. I think it was the first of its kind, or I like to think it was. I'd be really keen to get your views on what your definition of belonging is. Ours is really that it's an experience of connection, security, and community. It's about feeling at home without reservation. And it's an outcome of an organization's commitment to creating the conditions for diversity and inclusion for all employees. And our model defines 5 key pillars, which I'm just going to briefly talk about today. Welcomed, so that kind of introduced to and incorporated within the organizational culture and community from day one. Known, feeling understood, motivated, and being celebrated as an individual. Included, valued, feeling that value and feeling accepted without any reservation. Supported, consistently and meaningfully nurtured and developed for you in your career. And then finally, kind of that sense of connection, developing and maintaining relationships really across a diverse population. And so as we think about what the employee experience should look like as a way of engaging our employees really in the midst of a sea of change, we feel it should include these elements. Oops, let me click a button. So the first one is welcomed. As I said, being introduced to and being incorporated within an organizational culture and community. And people always say you only have one chance to make a first impression, and I don't think that's totally true, right? To be sure, there are best practices to consider, when someone joins a new organization or finds their way into a new team. And research shows that people who are really warmly welcomed and invited to be part of the community are 2 times more likely to feel that sense of belonging. Did I receive a welcome card from my new colleagues? Have I received some recognition from my new manager within the first week? Should I be doing an onboarding survey to ensure I've got all the resources and the support I need to start hit the road running? But the truth is that feeling welcome is not about the first days, the first weeks, the months or years. It's about every single day that you turn up at work. It's about ensuring that your employees feel good about the start and the end of each day, and that they genuinely were made to feel a part of it. Okay. The second one, as mentioned, is this sense of being known. And when I think about being known, I think about I suppose, being a whole person. At work, most of us are asked to perform lots of different functions, but when we go home, kind of our opinions are sought from being a parent or a leader or a coach or a caregiver. We are unique, all of us, and we're far more than just our work. And again, people who feel known as individuals are, again, 2 times more likely to feel that sense of belonging. So I think really this means that, are your employees being given that opportunity to really genuinely bring their whole selves to work? Feeling known can be driven for your employees by using recognition. And make that recognition tied to their goals or personal values. It could be recognizing defining moments in your employees' professional and personal lives. It could be recognition from a chief exec or a senior leader, and making sure that that employee is seen and is known, and really acknowledging the work that they're bringing to the business. The third part of that model is that feeling of being included. And I'm supposed not to have a favorite pillar, but hey, I'm amongst some friends here, hopefully anyway. I think this might be the one. Being included for me is the whole deal, right? Are you giving your employees a shot to begin with, right? Feeling included is impacted by the extent to which employees have the opportunity to share their thoughts, to be heard, and really to be truly valued. And once again, surprise, surprise, recognition is a great tool to display inclusive behaviors, or maybe supporting DEIB initiatives, making sure it's clear how to pronounce someone's name, for example, or creating a space for people to declare their pronouns. They're good, tactical, practical examples. I think the wider view is to ensure that inclusivity is not just something your company aspires to, which is really about values, but rather the way that you operate, which is kind of really what culture is all about, right? The way that we do things here. It could mean asking employees their feedback, involving them in co-creating that employee experience and that culture. Because research has shown that organizations that gather feedback more than, I believe, 4 times a year have a 50% higher engagement. It's a no-brainer. And those employees, according to our research, are 88% more likely to feel included and 40% more likely to feel known. The next element of that pillar is, if you remembered, is feeling supported. So being supported is another really critical aspect for that sense of belonging. And it occurs, I suppose, when employees experience action in response to the feedback that they provide. And when they experience recognition that makes them feel seen, makes them feel appreciated, validates the great work that they do. And I think people leaders have a huge role to play here. In fact, I think and our studies again shows that people with good supportive managers are 2.5 times, I think it's 2.2, 2.3 times more likely to feel that sense of belonging. We need to make it easy for people to access the people, the skills, and the resources that they need to be productive. And in today's world, from anywhere, really. The last, but certainly not least, is around feeling connected. Can I develop and maintain relationships across a real diverse network inside the organization? Again, the idea that I can connect with and learn from the people that help me grow. The use of tools that can connect employees and really kind of deepens that real sense of belonging and well-being, and that sense of kind of being home and having a place to call home. We have a really cool tool called Employee Connections. And ultimately, it links random people across the business together for a 20-minute connection. Find out what that person does, what they like. Do they like to travel? What's their favorite food? Really, really, really powerful. And those integrations then can flow across different work elements, might be through Teams or through Outlook. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to stay connected. But I think it's more than an idea, right? It's and more than an integration. I think in today's digitally divided workplace environment, many employees are so disconnected from other parts of the organization. And I think this lack of connection outside of your kind of immediate work circle really can have an effect on an employee's job satisfaction. I know it does for me, and kind of that overall feeling of belonging in an organization. And I think our job is to really remove the obstacles so employees and teams and managers and leaders, and they can show up every day and they can do hopefully what they intend to do. So if there's a few things to take from today, ultimately, when companies incorporate those 5 pillars of belonging with the individual employee in mind into their people programs, they are seeing these individuals who are hopefully 3 times more engaged and hopefully 3 times more likely to be productive, resilient, committed, satisfied, and ultimately enthusiastic about their jobs, about their organization, and about their experience. It's kind of a no-brainer, really. And the good news for somebody like me, the recognition geek or dinosaur, is that when recognition is done correctly, when it's strategic, when it's put in place, hopefully by an organization like Achievers, it really is going to drive all those different elements and those different pillars of belonging. So hopefully we're going to have some Q&A a bit later. Please feel free to connect with me. If you have your phones out, please scan the QR code. This is the research that I've just discussed in a lot more detail that you can read, hopefully, when you're bored one day, to take in a little bit more detail. But thank you, and looking forward to chatting a bit later on.
Thanks, James. That was really interesting. I'm certainly going to have a look at that research. Sounds really good. All right, it's over to me now. So I'm going to talk to you about organizational culture in today's hybrid world, and then we'll head into answering any of your questions. So just a reminder, if you want to ask any questions, you can just comment on the live stream. You just need to make sure you're logged into YouTube first. All right, so organizational development, organizational culture in today's hybrid world. So first off, what is culture? So at H&H, we describe culture as the sum of our beliefs, values, and practices, the operating system that powers H&H. McKinsey and Company have their own way of describing it, which is culture starts with what people do and how they do it. In any industry, what people do may not differ dramatically, but high-performing organizations distinguish themselves in how they do it. So ultimately, it's a fluid definition, but it's when thinking about culture for an organization, it's helpful for them to agree what it is and what it isn't upfront. Traditionally, employees have viewed the culture of their organization based on a range of kind of key touch points across their working day. So you've got things like office environment, behaviors of those around them, the types of communications they receive and how often they receive them, the types of perks they get at the organization, the leadership style, so how their managers and leadership team address them, and also things like dress code, what they expect to wear and what people around them wear. But we all know the pandemic changed a lot, right? It's something we all witnessed and felt and experienced firsthand. And a lot of research has been done to try and quantify, specifically what changes happened. So let's take a little look at some of it. So pre-pandemic, UK staff were going into offices on an average of about 3.8 days a week. Post-pandemic, it's now around 1.4 days a week, so significantly less. And this was done by research from Advanced Workplace Associates. But as you may have seen from recent headlines, this is a pattern that we expect will continue to change and flex over the coming years. And this is going to happen as businesses, figure out what works best for them and their cultures. For example, Lloyd's recently mandated that all their employees must be in the office 2 days a week now. And many political figures have come out to predict that the working in the office the majority of the time, so similar to what we did before the pandemic, will probably go back to being the norm. In July 2022, a study of over 13,000 global workers by consultancy firm McKinsey and Company looked at the motivators for employees staying in or leaving their role. And it showed that workplace flexibility is one of the top motivators people consider as to whether or not they stay in their role. It was actually rated just slightly below salary, which typically, is always very high on a list like this. And in the same study, it showed that 26% cited a lack of flexibility being a major factor in why they quit their last role. So if employees aren't satisfied, with the flexibility offered to them, they will move with their feet. And this is one of the reasons for the great resignation that we're seeing. Another study done by LinkedIn showed that 34% of employees said they would quit their job if hybrid working was taken away from them. So this is something that is, really important to people. People feel strongly about it. But what impact has this all had on culture? So before COVID, the idea of hybrid working was an ideal that many organizations were exploring or maybe trying to work towards. But as we know, COVID fast tracked this change to happen overnight, really. And I think one of the biggest surprises when we switched to working from home wasn't actually just how well people adapted, but it was how many people actually embraced it. And with all this change we've been seeing with this move to hybrid working at H&H, we wanted to find out what was really happening to organizational culture amidst all this change. So what we did was we spoke to 1,500 employees across the world to find out just that. And our research found that employees didn't think remote working caused their culture to fall apart. In fact, far from it. Those in the finance sector, like Goldman Sachs and Barclays, indicated that they were more comfortable with hybrid working than most. And interestingly, we found that the idea that culture is damaged by remote working was actually felt most strongly by those working in PR, marketing, and advertising. So perhaps these more creative industries are where the face to face collaboration is felt to be most important and more missed. But the vast majority, 70%, agreed that culture remains high on their priority list and it's something they, consider if they were looking for a new employer. And what about how a culture becomes to be? So our research found that most employees don't feel that leaders should be the ones to create or define a culture. They think employees should have a role in that. So the employees we contacted overwhelmingly felt that the culture should be created by employees. It shouldn't be something coming just from the top down. And our research findings supported this. More than half of the employees we spoke to agreed that it's more important to celebrate diversity of personalities than to have just one defined organizational culture. In fact, 56% agreed. And so our research suggests now more than ever, it's employees who are defining and shaping organizational culture, how it evolves, how it's nurtured, and how it's communicated. And with this, we're perhaps seeing an emergence of individual and mini cultures. So rather than an organization having one overarching culture, having more microcultures within an organization can increase that sense of belonging and individualism that James was talking about earlier. So diversity has been pivotal in empowering employees to champion individualism rather than just follow the herd mentality. And the move to home working and hybrid working has truly demonstrated that employees can and will work on their terms and in a way that suits them, and they'll still get the work done and be great at their jobs. People still care about culture, but how it's shaped and viewed has changed. And that's what organizations need to embrace. All these factors have impacted the way culture is shaped and nurtured in today's organizations. If leaders and managers are willing to embrace rather than fight these changes, they'll likely observe a more harmonious workplace for themselves and for their employees. And so, as the way culture is perceived has changed, the way it needs to be communicated needs to evolve too. And giving employees a voice is a really big part of that. So we at H&H worked with a Yorkshire-based leisure company to help embed its EVP, their employee value proposition. And we did this through, a really collaborative approach of a co-creation process, really, with employees. And this was through workshops, engagements, focus groups. And part of the aim with all of this was to slow down employee attrition for the business. So we used insights and personal stories that we got from employees, and we crafted this EVP, this story. And in showing how the business is innovative, and how it has this really inclusive culture, it was what would set it apart from companies in the sector. And so we wanted the employees and potential employees to see that choosing to work there was a really rewarding career decision for them. We supported this business in embedding its EVP in everything it does, from communications and the working environment to recruitment campaigns and employee reward. And it laid the foundations for a new approach to inspire personal connection and responsibility, putting everyone on the same pathway to succeed. And what we found was over 50% of employees, far more than was expected by the business, took part in our research to uncover what drove its people. The success of the EVP has helped in inspiring, attracting, and holding on to its brightest talent, even if they could earn 50p more per hour by going to the business next door. And that just shows the power of having an inclusive culture. So overall, if you want to create an inclusive culture, you need to find out what culture means to your people, your employees, and then you need to find a way to communicate it to them in a meaningful and engaging way. And that's certainly something we can help you with at H&H. So thank you very much for listening. If you are interested in finding more about our culture research, you can talk to us by emailing the address on the screen. I'll now invite James back for the Q&A session. Don't forget, if you want to ask any questions, just comment them and we'll get to them. Now, let me have a look and see if we have any.
Don't be shy.
I'll kick off with one of my own for you, James, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I loved hearing about the 5 pillars, and I think the first one around welcome, was really interesting because I think it's an area organizations neglect a lot. You think about the recruitment process and they do all they can to get the right candidate, but then they walk in the door and they kind of forget that they're seeing it all for the first time. So is there anything you would kind of advise, or kind of any tips you would have about that kind of welcome phase and how to make that first impression?
Yeah, that's a great question. And people do completely forget. They do
Yeah.
all of those amazing things to get the talent on board. And when they first join, they're like, what do I do? Where do I go? What am I doing? And all of that kind of element. And I think if I bring it back to what achievers are doing, we would really help individual leaders to be able to be very specific and ultimately provide that first piece of recognition, that first touch point to that new employee. So 7 days after an employee joins an organization, they would receive a welcome card. And if you don't have a platform, please use a physical card, right? Or maybe it's just an email, but it might be that your design team or comms can do something to make it look a bit pretty. But the way that we do it through our platform is the manager gets a notification maybe 2 weeks before Rosalind joins the business. And it will say, please don't forget, Rosalind is joining in 2 weeks' time. Sign her card, pass it round the team via email, get everybody to sign it, and maybe some video messages or some gifts, and have some fun with it. And then 7 days in, you get this lovely notification in your email, your brand new spanking inbox, and it says, hey, welcome to the team. And they see those lovely messages. So that kind of the end of that first really hard week, they get their first touch point from team members that they've never met. And what I love about that, it instantly then connects them. And they say, oh, Sarah, well, I haven't met Sarah yet, but she's put a nice note out there. Why don't I click on her name, find out where she works, what does she do, and maybe connect with her and have a conversation. So I think as early as possible to really make that connection and do something really specific to that individual. And of course, technology is a wonderful enabler to be able to do that, especially in today's world. So I hope that kind of answers a little bit of that question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. We've got another one coming up. How has hybrid working affected company culture? What should we be doing differently? I'll kick off a wee bit with that. I think what's kind of being tricky with hybrid working for people is you've got to consider everyone, right? So you've got people who are hybrid, you've got people who are at home, and you've got people in the office. And so I think what's really important is that you make sure you consider all of them, because I think it can be quite easy for organizations to maybe forget that. So it could be little things like if you're having a meeting in the office, making sure you put in a virtual invite as well, just considering that, whether it's town halls, events, really making sure you're considering each touch point all the time, because yeah, you don't want people to end up kind of feeling neglected. That's what this inclusion is about. It's about making sure you're considering everyone. I think you can ask colleagues as well, kind of, yeah, what they're feeling, and particularly if people are just working from home all the time or just in the office all the time. Yeah, making sure you're kind of addressing their needs without making anyone feel left out. Any more questions coming in? No. We'll give it a wee minute in case anyone has a last minute thought. All right. Well, I think.
Whilst we're waiting, Rosalind, why don't you tell me? I've got a question for you.
Sure.
When was the last time you felt appreciated and recognised at work?
Oh, we at H&H, we have a weekly meeting on a Monday morning. Everyone in the whole agency gets together, and we call it Cheers for Peers, but we basically kind of message or email each other, and it goes in. It all gets read out on a Monday morning. Who's done that week. So I think my project manager and my team had sent me one on Monday. Yeah, thanking me for some work. So it's little things like that, isn't it? Just a thank you email or a thank you message. It really does go a long way. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's great, and that's great to hear. And do you know what? I love the fact that you've told that story without you, I'm assuming, receiving pockets of cash, right,
Nope.
or vouchers or whatever. And I think that's a biggest misconception in what
Mm,
I am doing every day, is that people say we can't afford it, we can't afford it, and I think it's people don't need or want the money, right? As long as you're paying competitively, what people want is frequent validation, right? That you're doing a good job. So, your manager didn't wait till the end of a year to a big banquet to kind of say, do you remember that thing you did back
yeah.
in July? He or she told you straight away, or pretty much straight away. And then there's that frequency element, right? So Gallup is saying we should be recognizing employees at least once every 7 days, right? It should be a lot more. But the fact is that yours is purely a thank you. It's that validation. So we can all do it from that perspective. I think the questions come in whilst I was
Yeah, there
away.
is. How would you go about defining an employee-driven company culture?
Do you want to take
Um,
that, Rosalind?
Yeah, I can kick off. I think the most important thing is that you're involving the employees. So, I think in days gone by, when coming up with a company culture, it might have been the leadership team, for example, might have, or the comms team and the HR might have thought about what they want the culture to be and kind of start from that. But I think if you want it to be employee led, it's about involving them in the process. So whether that's by doing employee surveys, workshops, focus groups, throughout the whole process, involving them. So from your very initial kind of want to start getting the state of play as to where you are, right? So doing that kind of employee focus groups, and then as you're on the process, okay, you've started drafting maybe your EVP statement, things like that, then playing it back to employees and seeing, does this sit right? Does this feel like who we are? And if it's not, taking a step back and looking at it again. So I think it's you know it's not the leadership team that you're wanting to sign off on the culture. It's the employees, right? They need to agree with it and believe in it. So I think it's involving them at all the processes, and steps in creating your culture. Are there any quick wins when it comes to culture that you would suggest, something that we can implement fast? Achievers.
Yeah. No, we can just turn it on tomorrow. Wow, let's have a little think about that. Are there any quick wins? I mean, there are the obvious things in terms of I personally think what you should do from today is go back and look at what tools that you have at the moment, right? And it might be just using Teams, right? And it's a great example. Teams has a free to use kind of little recognition badge system. Hey, it's pretty simple. But it can tick a little box for something that could be turned on pretty quickly to allow you to start kind of fostering that relationship between manager and employee. So I personally would go and look at the tools that you're using, because I think if you look hard enough, you should be able to utilize some of them. Because I understand not everybody can go and invest in a recognition solution, for example, and it certainly can't be turned on tomorrow. But I'd go and have a look at the tools that you're currently using. And the other thing I would do is, and we've talked a little bit about this, is involve your leaders and managers. Go and speak to them and ask them about some ideas and initiatives, because I think you might find some of them are doing things that you are not aware of that maybe could be rolled out across the organization.
Yeah, definitely. I think you often find that in big organizations, that there's pockets of people doing things and you just need to find out about it sometimes. Best ways of communicating culture, especially in a hybrid world. Yeah, I mean, do you want
I mean,
to go off? Or
I
I can.
did. I kind of briefly touched on it earlier, and again, I suppose I think I want the human-to-human contact, but unfortunately, we are in this hybrid world, right? So, again, this concept of kind of coffee chats or connections is a really, really great way of doing it. We have the tool, but again, you could probably create something yourself internally. There are some really free to use tools that will allow you to maybe put all your employees in a virtual hat, and out pops a little pairing, and get those two people together for 20 minutes, send a calendar invite across to both of them and get them to connect and chat. But I think, again, it's utilizing some of the tools that you're probably already using.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to, communicating culture, of course you've got all your channels that you can use, but I think for me, most importantly, it's as you say, it's that people and face to face. It doesn't have to be face to face; it can be virtually face to face, but that having a conversation. So I think line managers are, a really great tool to be able to communicate anything, but particularly a culture. So, equipping your line managers with the skills and the key message to be able to have conversations, whether it's with their full team or one-on-one. But I think that's in a hybrid world, probably one of the best places to start. Ooh, what are the best examples of company culture you've seen?
Haha, that's a great one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to say it's actually where I am right now, Achievers. We drink our own champagne, right? And I think about other organizations I've worked for. And when I joined Achievers, getting my welcome card on the seventh day, it literally blew my mind. I was like, my gosh. So I think from my perspective, when I look at Achievers, and I'd love to talk to any of you in a bit more detail about why I believe that's the case, is that we practice what we preach, right? We have those connections, and we have day-to-day recognition happening. And we're only a business of 450 employees, but there are hundreds of recognitions happening every day. And like I said, these are non-monetary thank yous that are linked to values, linked to behaviors. And that really has created an incredible culture, along with a real open leadership model, where there is constant communication and town halls that are really, really getting to allow us all to understand the direction of the business. And when we've had to let a few people go, like many tech businesses have, there's been some really clear, concise communication around why that's happened, and what's going to happen going forward. So, yeah, I think the Achievers culture is a wonderful one, and hopefully I'm a good example of one of those engaged employees.
Great. Thank you, James. I believe that was our last question. So, yeah, thank you very much for joining. I hope everyone's found this afternoon insightful. Um, This is the penultimate session in the Inspiring Workplaces summer series, I believe. So you can tune in tomorrow for the last one. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank
Bye
you,
for now.
guys. Been a pleasure.